Take a break, Adamu. You are listening to Brothers of the Serpent podcast.
Ringers off, microphones on. Check. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, angels and demons and monsters and serpents, to Brothers of the Serpent podcast, coming to you not live from the 10 by 10 by 10 tangent cube of science, nestled amongst the dusty bones of an ancient seabed high atop the Edwards Plateau. I am laughing because Kyle is imitating me while I'm doing this. Sadly, we do not have the Watcher with us today, so this is a Watcherless show. So we are going to be skating on the edge of untruth.
We're going to be on the beveled edge of truth.
Right. Just make sure you don't take our word for anything we say. That's all we're saying.
Basically, when the Watcher is not here, all of you become the Watcher.
That's right.
So
tell us we're wrong.
Make sure you look it up on your favorite Scriptard site before you talk to your friends about it.
No, they're totally wrong about that.
Check it out on Rational Wiki and make sure we know what we're talking about.
That's right. Go straight to Jason Colavito and find out if we're wrong. I guarantee you we are. All right, since we don't have the Watcher, we start out with Space Weather News. From spaceweather.com, where we get all of our space weather news, solar wind is incoming. A canyon-shaped hole in the sun's atmosphere is facing Earth, and it is spewing a stream of solar wind in our direction. Minor G1 class geomagnetic storms are possible when the gaseous material arrives on March 15th. Arctic Skywatchers, warm up your cameras. Also, happy Pi Day. March 14th, 3.14, is Pi Day, and all around the world, Pi Files. Pi Files are celebrating one of the most compelling and mysterious constants of nature. Pi appears in equations describing the orbits of planets, the colors of auroras, the structure of DNA. The value of pi is woven into the fabric of life, the universe, and everything. Humans have struggled to calculate pi for thousands of years. Divide the circumference of a circle by its diameter, and the ratio is pi. Sounds simple, but the devil is in the digits. While the value of pi is finite, it is a smidgen more than 3, the decimal number is infinitely long. 3.1415926535897932284, and it goes on and on and on and on and on. He's got a long list of it here. Supercomputers.
Can it be represented in a fraction like 3 and 25,924 43,200ths?
Yeah, isn't it like 22 over 7 is the closest fractional approximation of pi, but it's still not quite there. Something like that. Don't quote me on that, guys. We don't have a Watcher.
Well, you could make it like, you could just, make it a lot bigger numbers.
Yeah, but you can never actually get to it.
Oh.
As far as I know.
One up, one down. One up, one down.
That's
one
right.
up, one down.
You're too high, too low. Too high, too low. Supercomputers have succeeded in calculating more than, 2,700 billion digits, and they are still crunching. The weirdest way to compute pi is to throw toothpicks at a table or frozen hot dogs on the floor. And he has links for that because I have no idea what he's talking about. Party time. Also, neutrons detected on commercial airplane flights. Long lines, narrow seats, baggage fees. You recognize this list. It is the downside of flying on modern commercial airlines. And now we have a new item to add, neutrons. Spaceweather.com and Earth to Sky Calculus have just completed a 5-continent survey of cosmic ray neutrons at aviation altitudes. From December 2018 through February 2019, Hervey Allen of the University of Oregon's Network Startup Resource Center carried Earth to Sky radiation sensors, including neutron bubble chambers, aboard commercial flights from North America to Europe, Africa, South America, and Asia. Neutrons from deep space were detected on every flight.
They have been called Hervey Allen suspenders in light of the Van Allen belts. They're not quite the same.
The results were eye-opening. Oh, wait, he does mention their Van Allen belts. Okay, Hervey logged 83 hours in the air as he traveled 41,500 miles above 30,000 feet. For reference, that's almost twice the circumference of the Earth. The entire time, he gathered data on X-rays, gamma rays, and neutrons in an energy range 10 kiloelectron volts to 20 mega electron volts, similar to that of medical radiology devices and killer electrons from the Van Allen radiation belts.
Yep.
The results were eye-opening. During the trip, Hervey recorded 230 UGY, which is micrograys of cosmic radiation. That's about the same as 23 panoramic dental X-rays or 2.5 chest X-rays. Moreover, 41% of the dose came in the form of neutrons.
How do you get half of a chest X-ray?
Just an upper chest X-ray? This confirms that cosmic ray neutrons are abundant at aviation altitudes and must be considered in any discussion of rads on a plane.
Rads.
Researchers have long known that cosmic rays penetrate airplanes. Our own 3-year survey of global radiation shows that X-rays and gamma rays at aviation altitudes are typically 50 times stronger than at sea level. This new survey focuses on neutrons, a more potent type of radiation from deep space. Studies show that neutrons can be 10 times more effective at causing biological damage compared to X-rays and gamma rays in the same energy range. Neutrons are so effective they are used for cancer therapy, killing tumors better than other forms of radiation. So, should we be worried about Hervey? Although he absorbed a lot of radiation during the survey, he did so slowly. Hervey's whole body dose was spread out over 14 flights in 3 months, unlike, say, a dental X-ray, which is localized to the jaw and delivered in a split second. Slow delivery gives the body time to respond, repair damage, and move on without obvious health effects. On the other hand, at least one study shows that low-dose radiation received over a long period of time may slightly increase the risk of leukemia, while flight attendants have been found to have a higher risk of cancer than the general population. Our survey also revealed some geographical variations. Generally speaking, neutron radiation was stronger near the Arctic Circle and weaker near the equator. It was the weakest all, however, in flights over Chile, as the aircraft skirted the South Atlantic anomaly. We will be investigating these variations with additional flights in the near future. Stay tuned.
Magnets! Wow,
Atlantis
really
was blocking cosmic rays.
That's right.
That is a fantastic article there from spaceweather.com. Man, I really think that's cool. And
Hervey Allen suspenders. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Cosmic rays, they come straight down. They're not like belts.
Right. The Hervey Allen suspenders are found just below the Van Allen belts. It's reversed.
Well, once you have them, you don't really need the Van Allen belts anymore.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, so I've always thought, like what he was saying, the higher the altitude you are, the greater the radiation. So you're at 50 times the radiation at sea level when you're at cruising altitude, which is 30,000 feet. So I've always thought that it's interesting that these ancient civilizations would build these gigantic stone things. I wonder if you check the radiation inside those temples or stone constructions, and it's probably way lower, just like down in caves, right?
Unless they're made out of granite, right?
Well, yeah, there's radon, but that's not neutron radiation.
Ah.
It's not the same. I don't think. Maybe it is Maybe it is neutron radiation. But it's still got to be lower than it is in space. Yeah.
Yeah.
But there's radon in everything, including sedimentary rock. So.
Sorry.
Are you focused on something else?
Well, I've been going through this whole, I got fascinated by the spectrography stuff.
Okay.
Like the frequencies of light.
Oh, yeah.
Created by exciting an element or whatever.
Yeah.
So I was just trying to think about the difference between the nucleus particles of an atom creating a wave of light frequency, like a neutron.
Yeah.
Versus the electron shell making a frequency.
Shifting and throwing out a photon.
Right.
Which is totally different. Yeah.
Yeah. But to me, I think of them as the same in the sense that they're both vibrating to a certain degree that allows the propagation of a
wave of some kind.
Right.
Yeah.
So when the electron does it, it's, not heavy.
Yeah. It's massless, quote
Right.
unquote.
So this neutron does it, and it's
got mass.
right. So what somehow the wave releases is well, not only a much higher frequency,
That it's got high inertia
yeah.
relative to the photon, which has almost no inertia because it's massless, quote unquote.
Weird, man.
Yeah. But yeah, the neutron radiation is dangerous because it's just like chargeless alpha particles running into stuff. They won't dodge anything because they have no charge.
Yeah. I've always had a problem thinking of waves in terms of particles. It doesn't freaking make sense.
Yeah.
I wonder, how does a particle expand as it goes out? Like when the electron shell jumps to a higher
Yeah, I don't
shell
know.
and then drops back down and releases a photon, but it's spreading out?
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah.
Guy.
I think that's just the model.
Yeah, exactly. So, anyway, what else you got?
Well, I have many user comments and commentary, so let's go through your news stories first if you got some. You got some?
Yeah, actually, I actually have a story that.
Should I do the comments first?
Yeah, let's do the comments because these couple of stories I think we might stick with for a while.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, the first one I want to do, I've got a kick-ass email here from Patrick Hicks, good friend of the show. Let me pull
You just
this up.
doxed him.
Yep.
Sorry, buddy.
Total. I've done it before.
Oh, okay. He seems to be doing fine.
So far, he's okay. All right, so Patrick Hicks says, "Hey guys, so I reached out before I listened to 88. I was sending a screenshot of Mark Boslow, correlating CO2 with ancient mass extinction events on Twitter. For your information, Mark Boslow is a primary opponent to the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis and has a self-publication comparing himself, listen to this, comparing himself to either a combo of Luke Skywalker and Carl Sagan, or if you are feeling humble, Tom Sawyer and Indiana Jones." Okay? This is Mark Boslow talking about himself. If you're feeling humble, Tom Sawyer and Indiana Jones. Okay? Okay? If not, Luke Skywalker and Carl Sagan. What follows that self-proclaimed description is a furthering of his self-proclaimed badass image. Needless to say, this dude ranks in the bottom 5 of people I would like to share a beer with. And massive thanks to George Howard for personally showing me the image masturbating ways of this narcissist. I just have a massive issue with correlating man-made CO2 emissions with global climactic catastrophe. Frequent listeners will understand why, but for you new snake bros, let me elaborate. The standard model spends tons of money and time explaining that our ancient ancestors were essentially wearing butt flaps and at best accidentally being awesome. But there was no science, not real science. No impressively, intentionally anything, just a bunch of almost naked dudes strutting around, all accidentally building shit perfectly, unaware of their genius because they weren't, allegedly. Now, when talking about climate science and crystal skulls, Raiders of the Lost Ark, Doom temples, and oh wait, never mind. Long story short, this dude is happy to pretend that the ancients developed technology so sophisticated that it could manipulate the CO2 levels of the ancient world. But when it comes time to acknowledge how badass the ancients were, he and other standard model scientists seem oblivious to the evidence surrounding our ancient ancestors. You can't manipulate the global climate and be butt flap wearers. Just as CO2 cannot correlate with man-made climate change if our butt flap wearing ancestors caused it. This is the classic, you have your cake and eat it too. Can you guys, speaking to us now, I think, please, just for a few seconds, explain how ludicrous the notion is that you can have both dumb ancestors and correlating CO2 levels? Like, pick one, Indy, Carl, Sawyer, Luke, Mark, guy. Oh, and for the record, when it comes to basic logical application, Mark, no, I am your father. Because only a toddler could so completely botch the application of logic. Pick a side. Were our ancients advanced enough to manipulate CO2 levels to the point it caused a catastrophe, or were they stupid and the globe just self-cleanses itself every so often? It is likely you are wrong twice regardless. Anyway, another amazing podcast, and I can't say thank you enough to the C-Word Pod guys for letting you water and feed their geologist. I will slither away now.
That's awesome.
Patrick, what else can be said, bro? I mean, he just nailed it all the way through that email. It was hilarious. You should write material for comedians, too, because, man. But yeah, dude, I totally agree that they want to have their cake and eat it too. the whole thing that like our ancestors were totally dumb, but they also were able to cause the mass extinction of the Younger Dryas, and it wasn't a climate. The climate catastrophe, if there was one, was caused by us somehow. It's just ridiculous. But they were dumb in butt flaps. But they destroyed the world. But they were dumb.
Yeah. All right. What else? What else you got?
Yeah, I've got an interesting comment from the website. Let me pull this up. Here it is. This is from the Ganton Brinks Door episode, which is the second one we did on the Great Pyramid recently, episode 86. This guy says, and he's not specifically responding to the pyramid stuff. I think he's talking about
What?
Yeah, I know. But I still got to read this comment. He says, wouldn't it be risky for an alien life form to physically visit Earth because of viruses that are here?
Exactly.
I think that is one reason we are not contacted. Another reason is the universe is so hostile that it is very hard for a civilization to advance far enough along to reach meaningful space travel.
Yeah.
So I agree with that up to a point. I agree that the universe is hard. And that advancement is hard, but the universe is also enormous. So it seems to me that chance dictates that even though the universe is hard, its size also implies that there should be many advanced civilizations, and some of them should be extremely advanced, far more than we are, and would have any kind of virus problem licked. Like basically, once you decide that, or once you realize that the age and size of the universe implies that there should be incredibly ancient, extremely advanced, so far advanced civilizations out there that we can't even fathom it. Viruses would just be a thing that they wouldn't worry about,
Maybe. I also tend to think that viruses are essential to the various development phases of life forms.
Yeah,
So-
okay. Well, I guess
so-
what I should say is that viruses aren't going to kill them if they come here or whatever. That's what I mean.
Yeah.
I think that's what he's talking about. Like the aliens would be worried about getting viruses that are local to Earth.
Yeah, that's what I'm worried about as far as time travel, right? Like,
Oh, yeah,
if somebody built a time machine, they're like, dude, you can go back to your childhood. I'd be like, no. What if I go back there and
Kill everyone.
Like, I bring viruses that are new that somehow these old viruses get in there
Yeah.
and start changing all kinds of stuff with me or everybody else in that world.
Yeah.
Of course, I would know that if I actually did it, it had already been done.
Yeah.
I don't know how to do this. I hate paradoxes.
If I have been, will be going back in time before. And I made myself sick, will be sick back then again. Yeah, you can't even talk about it. That's why we know time travel isn't possible, because we can't talk about it. How can you develop something if you can't even talk about it?
Yeah, I don't know.
But I mean, like, just think of the idea of going way back in time, just like really far back. Like back before anything like us was even around. Like, let's say you went back to pre-mammal. If you're just
that's
taking
what I'm
the
saying.
evolutionary
Like, we have
timeline.
no idea what kind of stuff would exist there, and it might
Right.
just kill you. You just get sick.
And kill
I
you.
mean, first of all,
and then you're the
the
fossilized
biggest-
skeleton underneath the mountain.
the biggest problem before viruses with time travel, we've already talked about this, is like,
Where
if
are
I
they?
build it has to be a space travel machine too, and then you have to be able to calculate where was Earth
Yeah.
at that time. And you
Right.
can't know that.
Yeah. Well, the assumption, I guess, is that if space and time are connected, that if you travel in time, the space is going to be responding as well. So maybe, because traveling in space, you're also you have to be traveling in time. So if you're traveling in time, then you have to be traveling in space.
Yeah, but traveling back in time, I think is a little bit
it
different.
should just rewind the universe, right?
Yeah, well, if you're actually going through the process in rewind, then a tree's going to grow up through your freaking time travel machine.
Exactly. Yeah.
Or a mountain will form, or a volcano will be there.
Right.
So you have to be able to jump, and then you have to know exactly where you were, which you can't know. So
okay.
you just end up in the middle of the sun.
Yeah.
Possibly, or that would
Yeah,
be extremely rare.
remember the,
you'd end up in the vacuum of space somewhere, and then you'd have to have a spaceship time travel machine.
Right.
So it'd be incredibly complicated, which is why it hasn't been done yet, and it will never be done.
Well, what was that movie where the guy just pulls the lever and time starts moving all around him? He's not jumping, right? It just like there's got a way of speeding up or slowing down how fast he's going. And like, I wondered the same thing. I'm watching the movie and I'm like, wait a minute. like grass is growing and trees
Yeah.
are appearing and stuff. How come there's nothing appearing where he is? Is there
Right.
just like this void that no one can approach all throughout these millions of years that he's traveling through?
And if you put yourself at the center of the galaxy, right, and the observer, let's say you were like watching that guy's time machine from the center of the galaxy, as soon as he started messing with time, you'd see him like hauling ass through the universe.
Right. Yep.
So because there's apparently, according to the standard model, there's a finite speed that you can go.
Then you can only go back in time at light speed.
At light speed. That's right. So you'd be limited by your space travel abilities.
So let's say that like time travel doesn't work as a jump, but like what I was talking about, where you pull a lever and the farther back you pull it, the faster you're going back in time. And just like in that movie, he starts out in his basement, but the building disappears, and then he's just on a plateau or whatever, you know, and the trees are growing and everything, the forest appears, and then it goes away, and then there's this massive, but nothing happens to the area that he's in. Somehow he's protected. So all the strange vortex areas on Earth are places where time travelers are going back in time. And sometimes if you walk through that area, you get flung off into time, and that's why you vanish. Right? What do you think about that guy?
So somebody's time traveling in the mid-Atlantic.
Right. That's one of them. And there's one in Sedona and anywhere else where there's weird vortexes. Like sometimes people just get looped around that time travel bubble that we can't
I thought
see.
we already established that time travel hasn't been invented yet and it never will be.
Because we haven't seen any time travelers
because
yet.
time travelers aren't everywhere.
Well, they're all going way back in time to the dinosaurs. Nobody cares about coming back to right now. Yeah, no, I agree. I think the fact that we don't see any time travelers is a good indication that
we really need to. You're right, though. We really need to talk about it in terms of space-time travel machine.
Right. It has to be able to travel in space in some way or another to travel back in time.
In many ways.
Yeah.
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 So, all right, mystery solved. Next mystery.
But back to the comment. I do think that, like I said, I agree with you on most points, but I don't think that. I guess my picture has always been that any alien civilization that is advanced enough will be able to conquer all the problems that you were talking about. So I don't think those are good reasons for why we haven't been contacted. In other words, I wouldn't say that we haven't been contacted either. I'm not sure that that's something you can say.
Well, we can't be sure. But it is a plausible reason why it would be, for example, difficult for us if we got the ability to travel to another world.
Yeah, it would be something we'd have to overcome. Yeah.
So it's a good point.
It is a good point. But it's also possible that we have been contacted, at least people
So the
have.
Orson Scott Card book, sequel to Ender's Game, I can't remember which one.
Yeah.
They're on this alien planet, and they're trying to figure out why all these beings on this alien planet are just like randomly getting sick and dying.
Yeah.
And eventually, spoiler alert, if you haven't read this, guy, I don't know, I didn't know your name, but
Yeah, I didn't say. It was unknown.
But yeah, so if 3, 2, 1, here we go. Turn off your podcast. Fast forward if you haven't read the book. But it's basically these aliens communicate via viruses. Like in order to communicate, they actually send viruses into the body and change DNA and stuff. And that's their way of actually talking to you, or these what they realize are other life forms. And so they are on such a small scale that they don't realize they're killing the host of these life forms they're trying to communicate with, basically.
Yeah, so, I remember that.
So that's like, it's a great idea, So that implies, or like, I guess Orson Scott Card's idea there is that, kind of like yours, that the aliens would have they would have the technology to do something about the viruses, either deal with it, or maybe the other thing you can think about is probes. Like they should be able to send remote devices to communicate with us if they can't come here themselves. So that could be another argument.
Right. And that comes up with you run into, if you follow that path, you end up with the
Black Knight.
Yeah. And farther than that, you end up in the gray goo discussion, right? Where somebody sends nanomachines, and the nanomachines are von Neumann machines. They're designed, like you send one, and its job is to mine materials and make another of itself. And they keep doing that, and you end up with gray goo everywhere. It's just nanomachines. It turns everything into more nanomachines. Not a good way to communicate, but
Yeah.
yeah. All right. I'm done with the comments. You got some?
Okay.
Yeah, so we're dumb.
We are dumb. Next section. We are dumb. So we never realized until the other day that there were comments, or that it's possible to leave comments in the donations through PayPal.
So people are sending us pyramid money and commenting with the donations, and we had no idea this was happening. So Kyle has some of them.
So I'm not going to dox you guys, but I will give first names. So this is from Jeffrey, a contributor to the Snake Bros Pyramid Scheme. He says, can't remember how I stumbled on the podcast, but I've been listening to all the back catalog, and I'm a big fan. Keep doing what y'all do. Dang it, Johnson. It's freaking awesome. Thanks, buddy.
Thank you so much.
All right, let's see. Next one is from Paul. Just a note. Stumbled into your podcast. Awesome stuff. Instantly became a fan. Question. I've also become a fan of the music, which I understand is all original. Where can I find your music for purchase? Godspeed. Thanks, buddy. Okay, so music. We have a band, $50 Dynasty. So there's all original music. It's on wherever you can buy music.
Yeah.
It's on Spotify. You can stream it. A couple albums. However, those are not the songs that are on the podcast. So those are rock and roll songs with lyrics and stuff. We have put a couple of songs on here with lyrics and a few things, but they're not published yet. So these songs that I use, I am planning to put them up, to publish them eventually. Excuse me. A lot of them are incomplete. So they're, just kind of short segments of songs that I haven't really finished producing yet. And I'll just be like, this makes a good bumper.
Yeah, since
piece.
bumper music is 30 seconds or a minute long, we can use segments of stuff that it's incomplete.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I definitely will be working on publishing this stuff in the future so that people can get it. But didn't you tell me you put...
Yes. So some of the
electronic
music, like the techno type stuff that Kyle has made that we frequently use for bumper music, we use pieces of it because some of the techno songs are really long. So we're able to use multiple sections out of one song, are available on SoundCloud. And I don't know how to tell you to look that up. It's SoundCloud.
Aethrim?
Yeah, it could be under Aethrim. Yeah.
Aethrim. Aethrim.
Yeah. So keep going with the comments. I'll figure this out.
Okay.
I'll watch this while you're doing that.
But yeah, buddy, I will work on that. And the Grand Watcher has also mentioned that, so need to work on it. It's a lot of work, but challenge accepted. Okay. Next message from Martin. Found you on Sacred Geo, listening from episode 1. How are you doing that? Think about pyramids every day. Eyes on the skies. That's freaking awesome.
Think about pyramids every
Martin.
day. Hell yes. Thank you.
Thanks a lot for the donations. Okay. Next one. Brenner. Quantum superposition implies you can have your pie and eat it too. And he spells that P-I.
Yeah.
And his donation amount was 3.14. That's great. Okay, next one, also from Brenner. GLAD, as an acronym, to contribute this sacred donation. And that amount was 1.37, which is the fine structure constant.
That's right.
Thank you, Brenner.
Thank you so much, Brenner.
Dude, it's funny. We get all these sacred.
Yeah, a lot of the donation amounts come in sacred number
numbers.
amounts.
So another one from Tim or Todd.
Yeah, could be Tim.
Don't get lost walking in circles. Also a sacred donation, a sacred number amount. So yeah, those are all the comments that I found. Thank you guys so much. And sorry it took us so long to get around to finding those comments.
Yeah.
But they're great. We love them. And we love all of you guys who have donated And also all of you who have donated and not commented. No comment donations are also accepted.
Here's money, no comment.
We really appreciate it.
Yeah, guys, thank you so much.
It's crazy, though. We get all these sacred number donations, and right now the account is sitting at a sacred number in total. And we're like, whoa.
Yeah. And what's great about that is if you guys keep donating in sacred number amounts, it will stay a sacred number. So go for it. Don't worry about ruining the sacred number because you can't do it as long as you do the sacred number. All right. We are going to take a quick break and we will come back with, I think Kyle's got some great news stories that we're going to talk about.
I do.
All right.
All of them are about snakes.
Snakes.
Snake Bros.
You going to sing to this song finally?
I can't come up with anything. All right, we're back, folks. Brothers of the Serpent podcast from the 10x10x10 Tangent Cube. So I have some stories here. So these are... I got a couple of interesting things. Okay, so first news story. Oh, and before I get into this, the stuff on SoundCloud is incomplete library.
Yeah.
And
very
it also
clear.
has one of our other friends' songs on it. But we'll once again.
Do you want me to tell them how to find it?
Yeah.
Okay, so if you just go into Google and type in SoundCloud and then Tsuroshi. That's basically like, think tsunami. TSUROSHI. SoundCloud Tsuroshi. You'll see him in there. It'll say Aethrim and then Cairo, and then Aethrim, stalactite. You'll see them. They're the first things that comes up. Tsuroshi is the username that I was using at the time, my internet alias, guys. Now you know who I am on the internet.
Yeah. But not all of these bumper songs are on there.
Right.
So there's
just a few.
Just a few. And
one of them is the caffeine molecule. That's not Kyle's, but it's still a good one.
yeah. And it's going to take me a while to either finish these or get them, I'm just like... such a bitch. I'm just like, it's not done yet. You know what I mean? So I'll try to get to where I'm like, it's done enough and post some stuff. So a lot of it's just like short
Gotta cut
clips
the umbilical, bro.
I end up sort of looping it because in a lot of cases, I was going to write lyrics or write something else to it. So I just loop it for a long time for 4 minutes so I can think about stuff while I'm listening to it or whatever. So a lot of these are just little sound clips, but
You gonna write some serious Radiohead stuff to it?
Maybe we should do it on our YouTube channel. Just upload 4 minutes of each bumper song on the YouTube channel so people could just jam it until they're tired of it.
That's true. You're trying to talk over my singing, bro.
Oh, sorry.
That's a good idea, though. Yeah, we could do that.
All right, we'll work on that. All right, now from Newsmax.com. Scientists announced this week that a massive solar storm occurred 2,700 years ago. 27?
Yeah.
Which is 72 backwards, just in case you aren't dyslexic enough to know that.
I never would have noticed.
And if a similar one happens again, it could be devastating to the technological infrastructure across the Earth. USA Today reported on a study published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. The findings indicated that a solar storm happened around 660 BC, and that it was roughly 10 times stronger than any other known solar storm over the last 70 years.
Wow.
Raymond Muscheller of Lund University in Sweden was the study's lead author. The team of researchers examined the ice core samples from Greenland that were estimated to be as old as 100,000 years and found radioactive isotopes that pointed to the solar storm taking place. Solar storms occur when the solar blasts from the sun interfere with the Earth's magnetosphere. Severe storms can cause power outages and worse. Such events represent a threat to modern society in terms of communication and navigation systems, space technologies, and commercial aircraft operations, the study read. Therefore, better understanding the possible magnitudes and occurrence frequency of such events is of great importance for safeguarding space technologies and modern technological infrastructure. A solar storm last April that was the result of a massive hole on the sun's surface caused northern lights earlier than normal. Yep. Space weather news. Okay, so this is kind of a shorter.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure, buddy.
Did they say the evidence they were looking at was from ice cores from ice and the ice cores they thought were hundreds of thousands of years old, and then
they think they're 100,000 years, but they found them in layers they think are
2,700 years old.
2,700 years
okay,
ago.
all right, because I was like, wait a minute, are they saying that the ice cores are much younger than we thought?
No, so this story really just doesn't go into detail, but the first one that I read that I freaking didn't bookmark had all this other data. Okay, about the study and everything.
Yeah.
So that's how I know that.
Okay.
But it's pretty well dated.
Yeah. Okay.
Now,
so basically, the ice cores at the lowest levels of the cores are thought to be up to 100,000 years old or whatever. But they were looking at this particular layer, which was 2,700 years old.
Right. Well, actually, it was also based on it was part of that plus the known decay rates of these isotopes.
Yeah. Okay.
And then they're calibrating
Yes,
and they're like, okay, so this is around 2,700 years ago. So it's multiple. Multiple lines of evidence, basically pointing to
calibrate this ice core.
That's right. Okay,
that's really cool, man.
Yeah. So the some of the other things they were saying in the story were, everybody was in butt flaps. It wouldn't have hurt them because they didn't have technology. They probably wouldn't even have noticed it, et cetera, et cetera.
Would it have made shamans in the sky?
Exactly. So my thought. Initially, when I read this, was 2,700 years ago. I wonder when Ezekiel was around.
Oh, yeah.
So, when did the prophet Ezekiel live? This is from Answers.com.
Wow.
Ezekiel was a priest in the temple at Jerusalem towards the end of the monarchy in Judah, and was then deported to Babylon in 597 BCE, which is basically 2,600 years ago. And he wrote his book there. The book of Ezekiel is notable for the careful way in which the author regularly tells us the exact date on which he receives his visions. Either Ezekiel was attempting to assure his skeptical readers that he really did experience these visions before the related prophecies came to pass, or he kept a series of journal notes dating each one as written for future reference. But they do provide us some dates to work from. He tells us in 40, what is it? How do you say this? 40, semicolon 1.
Chapter 40, verse 1.
Chapter 40, verse 1, that he received a vision in 573 BCE. So he would have been alive to complete the book sometime after that. The prophet Ezekiel is never mentioned elsewhere in the Old Testament, leading to some debate as to whether his name was a pseudonym, perhaps for a slightly later author. But this view does not have strong support. And we are about to crush that view completely out of existence.
Completely crush it.
In fact, I think that I would assume that the dating of this CME is more accurate than the dating of the book or life of Ezekiel.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about Ezekiel's wheels. Wheels within wheels. Ezekiel's vision, really, that he wrote about.
Right. So the book starts with this.
Right. So I'm just skipping 2. This is chapter 1.
Skip a bit, brother.
Chapter 1, verse 4. And I looked, and behold, a stormy wind came out of the north, a great cloud, with a fire enfolding itself, and a brightness round about it. And out of the midst thereof, as it were glowing metal, out of the midst of the fire. And out of the midst thereof came the likeness of 4 living creatures, and this was their appearance. They had the likeness of a man. And every one had 4 faces, and every one of them had 4 wings. And their feet were straight feet, and the sole of their feet was like the sole of a calf's foot, and they sparkled like burnished brass. And they had the hands of a man under the wings on their 4 sides, and they 4 had their faces and their wings. Thus their wings were joined one to another. They turned not when they went everyone straight forward. As for the likeness of their faces, they had the face of a man, and they four had the face of a lion on the right side, and they four had the face of an ox on the left side. They four also had the face of an eagle. So those are the four. Those four symbols
processional corners
are the four processional, like the cross of procession.
Yeah.
Right. If you were looking at the stars in the sky, so to me, he's basically saying,
North, south, east, west.
well, it's the constellations in the sky.
Okay. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So he's saying something processional there. And their faces and their wings were separate above. 2 wings of every one were joined one to another, and 2 covered their bodies. And they went every one straight forward. Whither the Spirit was to go, they went. They turned not when they went. As for the likeness of the living creatures, their appearance was like burning coals of fire, like the appearance of torches. The fire went up and down among the living creatures, and the fire was bright, and out of the fire went forth lightning. So, I mean, he's describing
some kind of plasma, something in the sky.
Exactly. These effects, like these bright lights coming out of the heavens with, what do you call it? Like these
like
features,
aurora effects. Yeah.
Aurora effects, these features that might look like faces or animals or whatever.
Yeah.
And there's lightning coming out everywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, this is, classic. Yeah. Okay. And the living creatures ran and returned as the appearance of a flash of lightning. Now, as I beheld the living creatures, behold, one wheel upon the earth beside the living creatures for each of the 4 faces thereof. The appearance of the wheels and their work was like unto a barrel. I don't know what that is. B-E-R-Y-L. Barrel. And they 4 had one likeness, and their appearance and their work was, as it were, a wheel within a wheel. When they went, if you remember that picture we were looking at of the Dragon Aurora, you can see like these, it looks like these almost like stalactites, the sheet type stalactites that come down, but there's other ones inside it, and they're sort of circular, waving around. It looks like
it's 3D,
like a rolled up scroll, like kind of sticking down, and you can see the different layers inside. When they went in 4 directions. They turned not when they went. As for their rims, they were high and dreadful, and they 4 had their rims full of eyes round about. And when the living creatures went, the wheels went beside them. And when the living creatures were lifted up from the earth, the wheels were lifted up. Whithersoever the Spirit was to go, they went. Thither was the Spirit to go, and the wheels were lifted up beside them. For the spirit of the living creature was in the wheels. When those went, these went. And when those stood, these stood. And when those were lifted up from the earth, the wheels were lifted up beside them.
So he's trying to describe the motion of the whole thing all at once.
Yeah, I guess so. This is
Beryl, by the way, is a mineral composed of beryllium, aluminum, cyclosilicate. It's a crystal. A gemstone.
Very green.
Yes.
Thank you, Watcher. Dude, so the auroras are green.
Yeah.
All right. It was a beryl. Should I keep reading this?
Well, I think we got the idea.
Okay, yeah. So that's freaking...
That's crazy. Like the dates
really
are so close.
Yeah, so 2,700, or actually there's 2,660 is the more precise number they put on it.
Right. And that other website was saying
598
BC. So like he was definitely
within 60 years, 60, 70, 72 years.
Yeah. That's really close. You talk about dating. I mean, like
exactly
talking about using isotope dating. That's really close.
So to me, I'm just like, all right, we've just found data that suggests there was this massive solar outburst, and then there's this guy that rolls into the city of Jerusalem and is like, I saw a vision in the sky, and it was freaking lights everywhere, and the lightning and all this stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's like on the one side we have the scientists over here that's like, the people of that time wouldn't have even really noticed.
Yeah, but we have textual references to crazy shit in the sky happening right at the same time.
Right.
Basically. Yeah, that's badass.
I thought that was pretty cool.
That's amazing, but it's not a spaceship.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the aliens could have been like, hey, the sun just nailed them. Let's go. They won't be able to tell the difference between our spaceships.
Let's hide in the Aurora.
That's right.
Let's hide our wheel within a wheel spaceship in Aurora. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And it's also interesting because, you know, like I wonder if there's just certain people who are more susceptible to like having, you know, I mean, it's been shown that electromagnetic stuff can do weird things to your mind, right? So all the thing where he thinks he's not, where he describes the stuff in the sky, but then after you get past all that, he has an apparent conversation with a spiritual being of light,
right.
you know, and it's almost like I wonder if the electromagnetic pulse like affected the guy. Like that's what makes him a prophet, is that he's susceptible to these kinds of influences, you know, like what makes somebody a prophet? What makes somebody able to see these kind of visions? You know, you're just walking along and suddenly, bam, you get struck by a vision from the sky.
Well, you know how nature, like the beauty or the mystery or whatever of nature, or some phenomena in nature, some phenomenon that you might witness can affect you emotionally, spiritually.
Yeah.
So there's something
Can totally change you. Yeah.
Yeah. So imagine
It's double rainbow. What does it mean?
exactly.
That guy was definitely had his mind blown. You could tell.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm just thinking that perhaps some of these like massive, I mean, just overwhelmingly huge occurrences that are just beautiful and crazy and maybe loud, or all this light and all this stuff might just totally cause someone to have a psychedelic experience, like
it can just induce one. Just
exactly. Mind altering. Just allow them to become like super sensitive spiritually or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you're out in the desert. You've been out there for a long time. You're herding your sheep or whatever. And then bam, you know, you just get nailed by this crazy shit from the sky. And you go running into Babylon like, I saw freaking animals and they had wings.
Yeah.
And people are like, okay, get out of here, but you stink.
Yeah, and maybe one thing that it tells you when this is happening is that, oh my God, like we are so small and vulnerable.
Yeah.
And this could destroy us all so easily. It's just
Right.
like, hey, look, I'm just gonna put my finger right down there and just crush this mountain. Just to show you that I hold all of your fates in my hand.
Yeah.
And so like that's a type of interpretation you can imagine having after seeing some freaking like incredible
some enormous phenomena in the sky, and you start thinking like
or perhaps it seemed to have agency or
right,
you know.
like if you're associating it with God, you know, if you're of that mindset and like you see this enormous thing in the sky and you associate it with like a spiritual, like somehow God is trying to talk to you,
right?
Whatever. Yes, it would be overwhelmingly enormous.
Yeah.
But
at the same time, you can imagine just things like, you know, a supernova in the sky making every single person on the planet look up and wonder, what am I? Why am I here?
Yeah.
So it could cause this, you know, sort of enlightenment, a global type of enlightenment, you know, just from seeing some crazy, because people, you know, forget.
Right.
Or perhaps they don't have the technology or the science to know the things we know today, maybe, but.
I mean, comets, very visible comets in the sky are historically known to, you know,
it changed people,
and drives some people
global
crazy.
Scale,
Some people cannot handle like looking up into the sky and suddenly comprehending how enormous the universe is, and like you're looking at this thing and you're like, "What is that?" And you just go nuts. You can't take it.
You look up at the sky and you're just like,
"Hold up, wait a minute, something ain't right."
Right. Yeah, and then you realize how small you are, and you're like,
"Hell no, to the no, 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 yeah, to the no."
Yeah.
Yep. And then instantly your mind is like,
portal. Yeah, signs and portents, omens. I think, Graham Hancock and Randall Carlson have both gone through a lot of the stuff about how, like, why exactly is it that comets are associated with death and destruction? You know, and I do think in one sense that even if you step away from the whole, like, okay, we've been hit by comets before, and this is probably why they're associated with it. Like when people start to see cometary things in the sky, they're afraid because we have some collective memory, or at least at some time way back in the past, that there's this you know, that there's the comets are associated with impact events. And I mean, I imagine that, like, you know, if the comet has already rounded the sun and it's coming back, and that's when we get hit, is after it's already gone around. You know, so after it's already gone around and it's got its enormous tail, and then it just keeps getting bigger and bigger and closer and bigger and bigger and closer, and then suddenly, like, maybe you don't see it impact, but then suddenly the world goes to shit.
Right.
If you're on the other side of the planet, you know, and the comet is just been getting enormous in the sky, and then one day it never gets light.
Yeah.
And then there's volcanoes and earthquakes.
And then hot and then cold.
Yeah. Yeah. And everything's dying and you can't find fresh water and enormous waves are coming out of the ocean. And just like, yeah, you would associate comets with death and destruction, but then setting aside all that, just the psychological effects that it has on people to look up in the sky and see this enormous thing that's visibly moving over weeks. It must be, you know, I mean, even today when people can look up there and think that they know what it is, it still would have an enormous effect. Right. You know, I mean, look at like what happens with solar eclipses. Like everyone flips out and like, everyone goes, you know, and then there's all I think Art Bell used to talk about this because I used to be I loved Coast to Coast, right? You know that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so what I did was I found backlogs of old Art Bell shows. Like, you know, Coast to Coast now is very streamlined and they have a website and you can sign up and you can get their basically like a podcast or whatever. But back in the day, I used to be able to find these internet streams where people just had enormous amounts of where they just recorded every show, right? Whether they did it on a tape deck or what, it doesn't matter. But somebody had recorded hundreds of Art Bell shows and then it converted them into digital things and then they just put them on a stream and you could just connect to the stream and I'd go to work in my machine and listen to Art Bell all day for 8 hours, just nonstop. And when the show was over, bam, the next one would start. And he talked about how he's like, look, being a radio guy and knowing lots of other radio people, radio guys who are hosts of call-in shows. He's like, we all know that full moons make people weird. You know, there's statistical data, and the police, all these police agencies have the same thing. Like on full moons, they get more calls. Weirder stuff happens, right?
Yeah.
But Art Bell was like, yeah, as a radio host of a call-in show overnight on full moons, the weirdness gets cranked up to like 10. And there's no scientific explanation for it. It's just that, like, just think of that. Like the moon that's always up in the sky, just the fact that it's full and it's a little brighter makes everyone weird.
Yeah.
Or makes the weirdness factor get cranked up a little bit. So you can imagine enormous streaks across the sky that are, you know, just so I love that kind of stuff.
If like, you know, the whole globe witnessed a massive CME that create like, okay, let's just take for granted they didn't have any type of, you know, electrical stuff, even though we had Baghdad batteries and, you know, any type of technology that might have been destroyed by this thing. And
even though we have Dendera lights.
That's right. If there was some massive auroral, you know, event that, of course, people near the poles were used to this, but they're few and far between in those areas.
Right, so the Eskimos never noticed. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Well,
something crazy happens.
Obviously, they would have been like, wow, there's like the auroras are crazy right now.
Auroras are big.
But for people living in the desert that don't see this stuff on a daily basis or ever in their lives, like the entire globe suddenly witnesses just massive auroras hovering over them and morphing and changing and lightning and all this kind of
right.
I mean,
yeah.
You can imagine why, you know, they were like, the end is nigh.
Yeah. Well, and then like I just have to wonder like how often have, and this is maybe a broader subject, but you just made me think of this, like how often have cosmic events kicked off enormous social events, right? Like, okay, for example, and I hate giving movie examples because I don't know, I feel like they're shallow, but that movie 10,000 BC.
Oh, yeah.
Right? The eclipse stops everything that they're doing.
No. That was Apocalypse.
Oh, that was Apocalypse? Okay.
Yeah.
That's what it was, not 10,000 BC. Yeah. So
I knew what you were talking about.
That eclipse comes across and suddenly everything stops.
Like they're murdering people.
Yeah.
And all the guys, they're collecting all the tribes from everywhere and they're marching them to the pyramid and they're going up there and then the eclipse happens and everybody's like, oh!
Right. Yeah. So something like that, but think of it the other way around. Like suddenly there's this enormous thing in the sky, and somebody jumps on that as the chance to say we need to launch all the ships and go invade, or what I mean? Like that's a sign from God that we're doing the right thing, or whatever it is. Like so you just this huge wars start, or like somebody kill. I don't know. That's what I mean. Like events that are social or political or whatever on Earth that take place in a certain way at a certain time because sudden enormous cosmic events happen in the sky and people take it as a sign, or people use it to persuade people that it's a sign.
Right.
I was just thinking of that phrase, the face that launched 1,000 ships, right? The Helena of Troy. She was the wife of Agamemnon or whatever, and she gets taken by the guy from Troy, and then they just launch this enormous army for this girl, right? So if you think of like a dragon appears in the sky, like shoot everything we've got at them. That's right. There's like a tense political situations, and they're like, bah! It's just like I don't know. I wonder about that. Randall Carlson often says that we live in a cosmic environment, and we need to think about that, But I've
been starting to think about it as in terms of weather, just simply like this is an extension of our weather. It's cosmic in nature, and the cycles are way longer and bigger than our normal weather. Yeah, so there's a cosmic climate, and it's changing.
Yeah. So you have the picture of the two guys sitting out there on their porch, and one guy's like, looks like rain, right? And then you have the cosmic version where it's like, looks like sky dragons, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Looks like
my big toe's swelling up. Looks like we're going to have a CME sometime.
I just thought of something else. What? I just forgot it.
Sorry.
Your joke made me lose it.
Cosmic causes.
I can't remember it. I don't know what it was. But yeah, I think that the cosmic causations of stuff is very interesting. And okay. So all the research that shows that a lot of the petroglyphs that we see.
Oh yeah.
And like sometimes I think of the frantic aspect of them sometimes, like
the petroglyph represents the forms in the sky that they saw due to plasma.
Yeah. Or any kind of space event. There was one that somebody posted on Twitter a couple of days ago. I think I showed it to you. The long, tall guy, and he's got halos around his head, and there's 4 circles next to him that have streak marks outside. It looks like it's some kind of impact event. They're showing, that tall space portal man and his chest guy is like standing there because these 4 comets are coming in or whatever.
And he's holding a snake?
Yeah, and he's holding a snake, so we know that he's a snake bro. So yeah, but there's you've got these pastoral scenes, right? And everything is beautiful, and it's like there's deer, and there's like a bison over there, and there are a couple of dudes over here, and there's a little baby. And then like up higher, much more frantically, are like all these freaking spirals and giant shapes or whatever. And it looks like the guy was like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, like trying to scratch, this down here is like all, he's like, oh yeah, it's a beautiful scene. And then he's flipping out, drawing this other stuff.
That's freaky.
All right, we ready for a break? I think we're at a break.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I also have one more story.
Oh, okay.
And maybe I can do this in 2 minutes. Let me just do this one. This is on a lighter note. This is from the Boston Globe, bostonglobe.com. Hipsters mostly look alike, and there's math to prove it. You can spot a nonconformist a mile away because they all look alike. Just ask mathematician Jonathan Tubal, an associate professor at Brandeis University. Like the rest of us, Tubal has noticed that people who strive to look different usually end up looking the same. He's even given it a name, the hipster effect. But Tubal has gone one step further by coming up with a mathematical explanation for why it happens. Tubal's dense, bewildering paper on the hipster effect has made him a celebrity in the abstruse world of higher math. And the premise of his work was ironically confirmed. It was written up on MIT Technology Review, a website run by the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. A reader of the review article threatened to sue, claiming that his photo had been used without permission to illustrate the story. Only it wasn't the reader's photo, but a generic image of a plaid-shirted, bearded hipster purchased from a stock photo agency.
But let me guess, that guy who read it was the first one to read it.
Yes, you read it before anybody else did. That's right. All of which just proves the story we ran, said Technology Review Editor-in-Chief Gideon Litchfield. So they have this. I guess this is a Twitter.
Yeah, Twitter comments.
Gideon Litchfield. Eric contacted Getty Images. Getty looked in their archive for the model release and came back to us with the surprising news. The model's name wasn't the name of our angry hipster hater. In other words, the guy who'd threatened to sue us for misusing his image wasn't the one in the photo. He'd misidentified himself.
He just looks the same as that hipster.
All of which just proves the story we ran. Hipsters look so much alike that they can't even tell themselves apart.
Oh my God.
Tubul specializes in using mathematics to understand the functioning of neurons, the cells that form connections in our brains, and which can also be simulated by computers. He works with researchers studying Parkinson's disease, hoping to find ways to relieve symptoms by synchronizing the functions of a patient's neurons. I was looking for a way to explain... freaking header. I was looking for a way to explain it that people would relate to, Tubul said. So I came up with this idea of hipsters. He began working on the hipster effect as a side project in 2014, publishing his work on Archive, a website where scientists post papers that aren't yet ready for traditional peer-reviewed journals.
Yeah, Archive. Yeah.
Yeah. MIT Technology Review discovered Tubul's work only recently after he posted a major update featuring more than 20 pages of math.
Wow.
Tubul created a neural network where some of the neurons would behave like conformists, usually, but not always, doing what the majority does. Let me reread that. He created a neural network where some of the neurons would behave like conformists, usually, but not always doing what the majority does. Others would act as hipsters, usually, but not always, making fashion choices that were the opposite of what the conformists would do. The neurons are designed to behave with a certain randomness because Tubul has found that this makes it more likely they'll synchronize, which is weird. He also added a time delay so that it would take a while for the conformists and hipsters to recognize changes in fashions. This corresponds to real life. Even the most fashion-forward hipster may not hear about some new trend for weeks or months. When he ran the model, Tubul found that after a while, he achieved the synchronization he was looking for. The conformist neurons would automatically approve of whatever fashions were favored by the majority. But in their effort to go their own way, the hipsters would also end up synchronizing around a variety of clothing or hairstyles that these neurons perceived as different. Over time, the hipster neurons would realize that their fashion choices were actually quite predictable. When this happened, they would abandon their now unfashionable look and synchronize around something different. For instance, Tubul wrote in his paper, if a majority of individuals shave their beard, then most hipsters will want to grow a beard. And if this trend propagates to a majority of the population, it will lead to a new synchronized switch to shaving on the part of hipsters, because beards have become the norm. In this way, wrote Tubul, they actually create the trends they will soon try to escape. I was growing beards before anybody else.
So it's safe to say that mathematician came up with that theory before anybody else.
That's right.
Yeah. He's the first to come up with that. Man, that's fantastic.
So now all the hipsters will abandon trying to abandon fashion. And they'll all look like everybody.
Yeah. When the nonconformists merge with the conformists, then you know that the end is nigh. And we will soon have dragons in the sky and space wheels.
That's right. And with that, we will take another snake break.
That's right. For some ancient Japan?
Yeah.
All right. And we are back. Snake Bros Institute for Advanced Coprolite Studies, where there are no degrees, just certificates of ignorance.
Yep.
You have to start handing those out eventually. Send them to people like Mark Boslow.
History Shift made us a
Yeah,
certificate.
He made us a great graphic as certificate of ignorance. Has the little bookmark looking thingy flipped over it. Yeah. Certificate of ignorance from the Snake Bros Institute for Advanced Coprolite Studies. This certificate says that you know nothing
about just about everything.
That's right. All right. So I've had this fascination with Japan for a long time. I love the culture, and I was big into the manga, the anime. I actually learned to draw using that stuff, and that, like, reading all that stuff, you get into the culture. You know, it's so fascinating. But I eventually learned that they have all these megaliths and these megalithic constructions on there, right? So then when I was getting into pyramids, and then I find out that Japan has like bent pyramids or like curved ones or whatever. Like, those are pyramids that have palaces on top of them. But there's a whole lot of stuff about Japan itself that's fascinating. And what's great is in Graham Hancock's book, Underworld, he goes to Yonaguni, and I think we covered that on the show. But in part 6, where is Japan, Taiwan, and China, and he specifically starts talking about the Jomon. So I want to talk about this because these people, I think, are part of the puzzle. Okay, right. So let's go for this. He says, 25, the land beloved of the gods. And then he has a part from an ancient Japanese ritual prayer here. It says, as a tradition which began in the high heavenly plane, I humbly speak before the sovereign deities who dwell massively embedded like sacred massed rocks in the myriad great thoroughfares. Okay, so this is like, he's basically, the implication here is he's talking about Shinto religion. Now, I would love to get somebody on here who knew details about Shinto, because it is incredibly ancient, and it basically is about revering nature, but also has something to do with enormous boulders. They revere gigantic rocks. So, like, I don't know if you've...
Okay, well, I'm just going to throw this out there, but the gods or whatever that he was just talking about, like, I immediately thought of glaciers.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So
they're moving giant boulders.
They're moving giant boulders around and leaving them, and so you're like, oh, this is a gift from the gods.
Yeah, so the thoroughfare is where the glacier went. Oh, wow, that's cool.
What is it? Read that again.
It says, as a tradition which began in the high heavenly plane, right, I humbly speak before the sovereign deities who dwell massively embedded like sacred massed rocks in the myriad great thoroughfares.
Yeah.
And then the next one is from the Manyoshu, and it says, the highest peak of Mount Fuji is a wondrous deity and a guardian of the land of Japan. Okay. The identification of the legendary Atlantic islands of Antillia and Satanazi with Taiwan and Japan is the hypothesis of Professor Robert Fusion, and is delivered as the punchline to his utterly convincing book, Legendary Islands of the Ocean Sea. He further suggests that the source map from which the outlines of Antillia and Satanazi, or I think that's how you say it, were derived, must have come from China and would probably have been drawn up during the voyages of the great Chinese admiral Cheng Ho. What Fusion does not notice, or Fuson, I don't know how to say the guy's name, Fuson or Fusion, Fuson maybe. What he does not notice is there is no reason why he should, is that Antillia and Satanazi on the 1424 Venetian chart do not portray Taiwan and Japan as they looked in the early 15th century, which is the epoch of Cheng Ho's voyage. But instead, as they looked around 12,500 years ago during the meltdown of the Ice Age. Okay, so here we have another...
So this guy that's writing about him or depicting this stuff is...
He's basically saying this professor, Fuson, has this theory that that Japan and parts of Taiwan were actually these mythical islands, right? And he suggests that the source map from which these outlines of these mythical islands were derived must have come from China. And they would have, and then he says that they would have been drawn up by Cheng Ho, this admiral who went on this famous sea voyage.
Got it.
Graham is pointing out that this Venetian chart does not portray Taiwan and Japan as they looked in the early 15th century, which was when Cheng Ho went on his voyage and would have been mapping whatever he mapped.
Right.
But instead, this Venetian chart shows how these islands looked 12,500 years ago.
Before the sea levels rose.
Right, during the meltdown of the Ice Age. So he says, one would have to go back to around that date, for example, to find the three main Japanese islands, Honshu, Shikoku, and Kyushu, joined together into one large island, as is the case with Satanazi. So I guess this guy's theory was that Satanazi was Japan, but Japan now is separated into three main islands. Satanazi was an enormous island, all one. And so Graham Hancock was like, yeah, that would have been when the sea level was way lower. I will substantiate this statement and pursue this mystery to its conclusion in due course. Meanwhile, by a strange roundabout route, I have found my way back to Japan, encountering it where I at least expected it, in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. Long before I learned that it had been shown in its Ice Age configuration on a 1424 chart, however, I was already acutely aware of another Japanese mystery centered on the end of the Ice Age when rapidly rising sea levels inundated a series of massive rock-hewn structures around the coasts of the Ryukyu archipelago of southern Japan. And then he's talking about Yonaguni and other stuff. I've outlined some of the background to this in Chapter 1, how I first learned of Japan's underwater ruins in 1996, and how the generosity of an extraordinary Japanese entrepreneur enabled me to explore all the main sites between 1997 and 2001. I made close to 130 dives at Yonaguni with logistical assistance from the Seamen's Club Ishigaki, and with the best and most knowledgeable local teams led by men like Chiakiro Aratake and Yohachiro Yoshimaru. Then there were around 18 dives at Karama on 5 different visits there, again in the company of great local specialists. I successfully dived twice at Aguni, in a most forbidding, inaccessible, and difficult spot, and around a dozen times at Chatan off the west coast of Okinawa, again, in both places with exceptional local support. In Chapter 1, where I briefly describe the 4 main Japanese underwater sites, I also suggest that the solution to the mystery of these places, and to the interminable wrangle about whether or not they are natural or man-made, cannot be arrived at purely by a consensus of geologists. This is not only because there is, in fact, no consensus of geologists on the character of these structures, but also because geological opinion alone is not adequate to settle the matter. One need not be a specialist in anything to see that Japan has cultivated a unique sensitivity to the beauty that is immanent in natural forms, and to realize that such a refined intimacy with rock and mountain, forest and valley is likely to have extremely ancient roots. Sculpting in rock and the placing of sculpted rocks in artistically manipulated landscapes remains a distinguishing Japanese passion, and an intensely spiritual one to this day. It therefore makes sense, in pursuit of reasoned conclusions about the underwater rock structures of Japan, to take into account not only geological considerations, but also what is known about the character, the level of development, and the artistic and religious culture of the ancient Japanese at the end of the Ice Age, when those rock structures, whether natural or man-made, were not yet submerged. So, preconceptions about the Jomon. At first glance, I could see nothing encouraging about prehistoric Japan. The consensus view for the past half-century has been that during the period from 17,000 years ago, which is roughly the end of the last glacial maximum and the beginning of the global meltdown, down to about 2,000 years ago, the islands were populated exclusively by a culture of hunter-gatherers, the Jomon, who were in most respects extremely primitive. So that's the standard model.
Right.
The Stone Age image of the Jomon put me off of the idea of researching them. How could so backwards a people who supposedly never discovered agriculture have anything to tell me one way or another about my central interest, the possibility of a great lost civilization of antiquity? Small tribal bands wandering from place to place, grubbing around in the mud for nuts and berries, spearing the odd fish or mammal, did not fit with my idea of what I was looking for. Nevertheless, I knew that I could not afford to discount the Jomon entirely, if only because their culture seems to have emerged very suddenly in Japan around 16,500 years ago, at which remote date is attested to by fragments of the oldest known pottery in the world. The pottery itself at such an early date is highly anomalous, and whatever the end of the Ice Age really meant, then and for thousands of years afterwards, the Jomon witnessed it. They went through it, were part of it, and triumphantly survived it down almost to historical times. I still felt a definite reluctance, but I realized that sooner or later I was going to have to learn more about this prehistoric people whose story was veiled by the mists of the past. So the next part, prehistoric city and the man-made mountain. Sound familiar? In 1998, on the suggestion of Japanese friends, I visited the Jomon site of Sanai Murayama in Aomori Prefecture and was surprised to discover how large and how well organized the ancient settlement had been at its peak 4,500 years ago, the same epoch exactly as ancient Egypt's pyramid age, quote unquote. Sanai Murayama, with its spacious public buildings, wide streets, and planned sanitation, was not at all what I had expected of primitive hunter-gatherers. This is also the same period as Mohenjo-Daro, right? And you have the same thing, planned sanitation, public streets, a pre-planned settlement. The whole thing is obviously pre-planned. It wasn't like haphazard, like
Where's Mohenjo-Daro again?
Taiwan, Pakistan/India.
All right.
So other side of the world, basically. In the northern hemisphere, Japan's the southern. It's like really far away. Okay, so these were the obvious signs of permanent settlement, stability, order, organization, and economic success. So you have this Jomon settlement, and they're pictured as hunter-gatherers, but you've got this town with pre-planned sanitation, and but they're hunter-gatherers like digging in mud, right? It's strange.
There's some lovely filth down here.
Oh, hello. And they were accompanied by equally clear indications of a society with evolved spiritual ideas. In particular, the use of grave goods by the ancient inhabitants and of symbolic burial patterns are suggestive of complex beliefs in the afterlife of the soul. A ceremonial pathway that dominates the site proved, upon excavation, to be lined on each side by tombs with the feet of the dead pointing towards the path and their heads away from it. On the same trip, I learned that certain pyramid-shaped mounds, hills, and mountains are regarded as sacred beings in Japanese mythology, like they are beings in and of themselves. Pyramid-shaped mounds and hills. Whether they're natural or not, doesn't matter. It's like if it looks like a pyramid, it's a deity, a being. Maybe not a deity, but
I understand the sentiment, yeah.
Let's see. And I also saw evidence which suggests not only that this belief is rooted deep in Jomon times, but also that it sometimes led the Jomon into artistic manipulation of the landscape on an even larger scale than the disputed structures now underwater at Yonaguni, Chatan, and Karama. So on land, there are places where there's manipulated landscapes that are bigger than Yonaguni. So in Akita Prefecture, for example, 2 hours drive from Aomori, I climbed the cedar-covered slopes of an 80-meter-high mound, which juts emphatically out of the surrounding plains. Its name is Kuromata Yama, or Mount Kuromata, and according to local legend, it is a pyramid built by an ancient people, unquote. Geologists remained skeptical until a multidisciplinary team of scientists from the Japan Pacific Rim Studies Association, led by Professor Takahashi Kato of Tohoku Gakuen University, produced detailed radar maps of Kuromata Yama in the 1990s. The maps show that the interior of the mound, quote, consists of 7 terraces, with stones laid out on each terrace. This is a clear indication that it was shaped by man and is certainly very different from a natural mountain formed by volcanic eruptions or natural weathering, unquote.
That's freaking crazy. When is that supposed to be? This is around the time of the pyramid building?
Well, they don't even know. I haven't gotten to the date of this yet.
Yeah.
He just said he climbed it. The experts concluded that a natural hill had indeed once stood on the site, but this had been completely quarried, sculpted, and reinforced with stone blocks to create a pyramidal core with 7 terraces that was finally covered with ramped earth, which was then overgrown by vegetation. Thus, quote, although the mountain is not a pyramid in the Egyptian sense, it was nevertheless made into the shape of one for religious purposes, unquote. Since work of such ambition and scale has never previously been associated with the Jomon, it was at first assumed that the construction work was unlikely to be very old. Right, here we go again.
Yeah.
Göbekli Tepe, right? That stonework is great. Must be like 15th century or whatever.
Yeah.
You know? Nope. Oldest thing ever found ever. Okay. Perhaps no older than the 11th century AD. That's what they thought, just because of the stonework was too good. The Motomiya Shrine of Japan's indigenous Shinto religion that stands on its summit. So at the top of this pyramid thing, there's a shrine.
Yeah.
That stands on its summit seems to be linked to that epoch, in other words, 11th century AD, since it is named after a physician who served Sadato Abe, which was in AD 1019 to 1062, who was a local ruler of northeast Honshu. On the other hand, since Shinto shrines are completely rebuilt according to a pre-existing pattern every 20 years, right?
Yeah.
On sites that in most cases have been sacred ever since records began, this perhaps proves less than it should. In other words, the age of the site means almost nothing.
Very similar to what's going on in Giza, where it's like, hey, I fixed this Sphinx up. And they're like, that guy built it.
Right, exactly. So just because you can build a shrine on top of a hill doesn't mean you made the hill, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, there's that, what is it, Cholula down in Mexico? Biggest pyramid in the world.
Not Cholula.
It's got a cathedral on top of it. No one thinks that the Spanish built the pyramid, even though it has a Spanish cathedral at the top.
Dang it! Need a watcher. Because Cholula is where we went to the race, the short course races, right across the border.
Well, it could be named after it. I'm pretty sure it is.
Oh,
Cholula.
maybe. Okay.
I-
All right. You
Yeah,
could be right.
I think it might be.
Because if there was a pyramid there, I think we would have known about it.
Yeah, I think we would have gone. Yeah. Equally, okay, let's see.
And if we didn't,
Yeah, it's terrible. At any rate, the excavations by archaeologists on Professor Cato's team settled the matter with the discovery of fragments of Jomon pottery in the mound and other archaeological evidence which confirmed beyond serious dispute that Kuromata Yama had indeed been landscaped into its pyramidal form in the Jomon era. Equally important was another discovery published a year earlier by team member Masachika Tsuji of Doshisha University in Kyoto. He showed that 4 Shinto shrines positioned around the base of Kuromata Yama lie in direct lines pointing north, south, east, and west from the summit and incorporate solstitial alignments, datable through the acceptable formula for changes in the obliquity of the ecliptic to 4,000 years ago. The shrines were built relatively recently on what are known to be sacred sites dating from ancient times, suggesting that the shrines themselves may have maintained that link since the Jomon period. Surviving ancient texts enable us to trace the recorded story of Shinto back at most about 2,500 years and realistically probably less than 2,000 years. However, at that stage it seems already to have been fully formed. All authorities therefore agree, though lost in prehistory, that Shinto's origins must be much older than 2,000 years. As far as I know, however, the discoveries at Kuromata Yama are the first to demonstrate such a clear relationship between the religious architecture of the prehistoric Jomon and the Shinto religion as it survives and expresses itself to this day, a religion, it is worth reiterating, that is unique to Japan and that is of unknown age and origin.
okay, so you're right. Great
Cholula.
Pyramid of Cholula,
Yeah.
which is not where we went.
No.
in Baja.
Not even close. Yeah.
But that is the name of the place we went.
Okay.
Right across the border to watch that race.
Oh, yeah.
It was just a. We went with mom and dad.
Yeah. Perhaps
And
the
Steve Sullivan.
That's awesome. Perhaps the clearest sign of a family relationship to emerge from the excavations is that the Motomiya Shrine shares the summit of Kuromata Yama with the remains of a previously unknown stone circle constructed by the Jomon. Kuromata Yama is also clearly visible from 2 further Jomon stone circles that have been excavated at Oyu, 2.2 kilometers to the southwest. Both of these are more oval than circular, one about 35 meters in diameter, the other 20 meters in diameter. Both are about 4,000 years old, a little younger than Britain's Stonehenge. By European megalithic standards, they are not large, and the stones actually used in their construction are puny when compared with Stonehenge or Karnak. Still, they are stone circles in every meaningful sense of the term. The mystery of the pots. Nor were these the only surprises that Jomon had in store for me, as we've already noted. What is truly outstanding and unexplained about these, quote, primitive hunter-gatherers, unquote, is that they were the first people in the world to invent pottery, one of the great leaps forward in human culture, which, in their case, took place not just hundreds, but thousands of years before anyone else. As recently as 1998, most scholars believe that the oldest Jomon pottery was made about 12,500 years ago. Itself a staggeringly early date, but so rapid is the pace of new discovery in this field that the origins of Jomon civilization have had to continuously be revised backwards. In May 2000, on my second visit to the Aomori area, I held in the palm of my hand 4 fragments of a broken Jomon pot, 16,500 years old.
Dang.
Excavated at a site known as Odeyatamamato, something like that. Number 1, Iseki. The potsherds had been dated using state-of-the-art AMS technology. It is still a little-known fact that the Jomon of Japan are the world's oldest pottery-making culture. But even less well-known is the extent to which this prehistoric people maintained a distinct identity as a single, homogeneous group. According to Dr. Yasuhiro Okada, the Aomori Prefecture's chief archaeologist at Sanai Murayama, they were one culture from beginning to end. Imagine that. One culture, probably one language, probably one religion, staying intact for more than 14,000 years.
That's crazy.
That's the time span between the oldest known Jomon pottery at 16,500 years ago and the youngest examples, which are about 2,000 years old. Genius or influence. So what happened to the Jomon? If their culture could survive for 14,000 years, how come they aren't still with us today? The archaeological record points to the influx into Japan, probably from Korea, and probably between 2,700 and 2,300 years ago, of a larger, more populous, and more economically competitive group of people, named the Yayoi by modern scholars. We do not know what they called themselves. These were sophisticated, highly organized rice growers, and it is generally supposed that their way of life simply overwhelmed that of the indigenous hunter-gatherers. Although the Yayoi were a martial culture and the Jomon were not, there is no evidence of military conflict or of genocide.
Maybe they were nailed by a CME.
Yeah.
You know,
The
2,700 years ago.
Yeah, that sounds right. The Jomon were not wiped out. If anything, the latest archaeology prompts us to envisage something more like an effortless merging and mixing of peoples into the new synthesis that would cross from prehistory into history, from forgotten time into remembered time, in the already complete form of classical Japanese civilization. In a sense, therefore, Jomon culture is still with us and may never have come to an end. In other words, what he's saying is that the reason we still have Shinto and all these other very specifically Japanese island traditions is because the Jomon and all of their culture and traditions merged seamlessly with these peoples, and it was carried up to this day.
Yeah, well, if they were particularly enlightened and some culture came along that could rice farm and all this kind of stuff, they would probably be like, oh, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Join with me.
Yeah.
And together.
You get off my land. Nope. Does it have a beginning, though? The archaeological record is constantly subject to revision by new evidence. But to the extent that the Jomon are defined by and identified with their pottery-making skills, then the earliest definite evidence for their existence that has so far been discovered consists of that little group of pottery fragments from 16,500 years ago. Did something happen in Japan at that time that could explain why the Jomon invented pottery millennia before anyone else? Shimoyamu Satoru of the Ibusuki Archaeological Museum on Kyushu Island suggests maybe there was just a Jomon genius who figured it out. You know, clay, open fire, pot. He saw the potential. On the other hand, Professor Sahara Makoto, Director General of the National Museum of Japanese History, believes that, quote, there must have been some influence, unquote. Sitting cross-legged on the floor of his office, he drew up a map of Japan, China, and Siberia. Here in Japan, he explained, we have high levels of development. New roads, new houses, even new cities are constantly being built. This means that the soil must be broken and turned over. And every time this happens, there is the possibility of archaeological discovery. But in China, such activity is much less, and in Siberia, less still. So it is possible in Siberia, for example, that archaeologists might one day find the traces of an even earlier pot-making culture that influenced the Jomon. Which is true. I agree with him on that.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that he...
It's sort of like passing the buck. You know?
Right. It's also interesting because he's pushing it farther back. Right?
Yeah.
He's like, yeah. I mean...
Well, I don't have a problem with that either.
I don't either.
It's kind of like...
What I'm wondering is why he thinks that they didn't invent it. I guess because it just appears fully formed.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
But I mean, if they keep finding older and older Jomon stuff, like who knows how long they were there in the first place, right?
Yeah. Well, the trend is it keeps getting pushed back, so he's probably just like, safe bet, push it back.
Push it back, yeah. 40,000 years ago. Technology transfer. What neither scholar appears to take into account is the peculiar coincidence in dates between the earliest Jomon pottery, about 16,500 years ago, and the end of the last glacial maximum, about 17,000 years ago, which was followed by thousands of years of ice sheet meltdown and global sea rise levels. Or, I'm sorry, sea level rises. Is this just a coincidence, or could there be some weird causative link between the post-glacial floods and the pottery?
So I had an idea about that. I was thinking of the, what is it, Yonaguni?
Yeah.
The underwater,
Yeah.
like cut stone and everything. And I just watched this video recently. I think History Shift posted it on Twitter. And it was this guy's idea about how the pyramid was built and where they used water and they worked the stones underwater and then they put buoyant, attached buoyant sacks.
Like they were diving and working? Wow.
No. They're standing in like chest deep
okay.
water and they've got these massive stones in there, but they're able to flip them and do stuff because they're
buoyed up by part of their weight is held by the water.
Yeah. It makes it a lot easier to move them around, and then they can use, buoyant materials to attach to them that make them even lighter.
Yeah.
And so that just got me thinking about that cut stone or whatever. But I was thinking, what if the sea was rising gradually?
Yeah.
Slow enough to where it's like this place that they used, it's like, hey, we can go in here and like manipulate the stone a lot easier while it's, this shallow water.
Yeah.
But that would require this slow sea
Yes.
level rise, which, evidence that we talk about here, the end of the last ice age may have been catastrophic. And so
Right.
it wouldn't have been enough time.
Into the LGM, up to the Younger Dryas, it was a slow
they're
rise.
slowly rising up so they can like do all this kind of stuff around, the rocky outcrops
Yeah.
in harbors or wherever it was calm
It's a
seas.
fantastic idea. Yeah. Take a deep breath and lay underneath its block.
Yeah. Exactly.
And I'm going to float it over there while you're holding your breath.
Yeah, so that one of the ideas that he had was like cedar wood is
Buoyant.
really buoyant. So they could take these cedar logs and they could lash them to the stone,
Yeah.
and then they could roll the stone over
And then lash more.
and lash more and
Yeah.
keep rolling, and it would get more and more buoyant. And they were the guy had like worked out the buoyancy of the cedar logs versus the weight of the stone. And after you put so many in, they can be really long,
Yeah. Yeah.
So as you roll the stone over, and then you have this level surface on the top.
Yeah.
You can use the water level to level your, as a level for when you're working the stone to make it perfectly
Well,
flat.
it's ocean. Very rarely
Well,
flat.
in his model, he was talking about channels off the Nile that went around the pyramid base.
Okay, pyramid. We're
But-
not talking about Yonaguni.
Well, I am in the sense that this is the ideas that he had,
Right.
based on this idea. So you have these level surfaces. If the water's calm, obviously,
Yeah.
you start working the stone, and you're like, dang it. I have problems with the idea, but the
Right.
point is that it is a way to make stone more buoyant. So
Yeah, that is really cool. All right, we're going to take our final break, and we'll come back with the Jomon.
man, we're already at final break.
Yeah, Shinto, man. I need to know more about Shinto religion.
This is a black racer snake.
Worshipping giant rocks.
It's fast. Fastest 2 hours in media.
Podcasting.
Oh yeah, podcasting. Yeah, that's right.
Isuru. 3杯目にはすっと出すのよ。なかなか脱ぎ咲く。ありがとう。ありがとうございます。
Welcome back. Final segment of the final hour of Brothers of the Serpent podcast.
That's right.
With the Yonaguni. Wait. The Jogon. Or
Jomon.
Jomon.
Yeah.
All right.
Jomon.
Jomon.
Oh, the ancient Jomon.
Yes.
All right, where was I?
We
at
watched
here?
a lot of anime.
Yeah, we did. A lot of anime. Still own a lot of anime. Okay.
What were you saying in the break? Like, these guys weren't dudes with spears and butt
Yeah,
flaps.
it's Japan.
Yeah.
So they weren't dudes in butt flaps carrying spears.
Yeah.
They were in butt flaps carrying samurai swords.
That's right.
It's Japan. Swords and butt flaps.
Swords and butt flaps.
That's right.
Yeah. All you got to do is wait for a meteorite, and crash and burn.
Right.
And let it cool down for a little bit. Go collect it from the crater.
Right.
Come back to your fire.
Yeah.
Get a hammer. And hammer on it for thousands of years. And then you have a samurai sword. And no one can break it.
If you should encounter God on your journey, God will be cut. Right? Hattori Hanzo, dude.
Yeah.
God will be cut. And they, so you got the guy with the sword and butt flap, and he's got the enormous jar with the freaking giant kanji on it, like, right? Carrying that around too, drinking out of it.
It's awesome.
Yeah. Sahara Makoto has already expressed his view. By the way, I am reading from Underworld by Graham Hancock. Sahara Makoto has already expressed his views on the subject of influence. He thinks the Jomon were influenced by an earlier, probably Siberian, pot-making culture. But to be fair, that is just his guess. It is undoubtedly correct that pottery was being made at a very ancient date in Siberia, though not as ancient as the oldest Jomon. However, the ideas of pottery, the essential mental work to make the great leap forward, does not require contact with a hypothetical mainland tribe. And what counts against this hypothesis is the paleogeological evidence. As the archaeologist Douglas Kenrick points out, when the earliest recorded pottery was made, the sea had engulfed any land bridges that might have remained and had created a natural barrier between Japan and the mainland. In other words, if the Jomon were influenced 16,500 years ago to become potters and whatever else, then that influence is more likely to have entered Japan by sea than by land. It could theoretically have been passed on by a single survivor, or even a handful of survivors of a shipwreck. And since those were times of global floods, the possibility cannot be ruled out that such a ship could have come to Japan from very far away, could theoretically have been blown in from almost anywhere. But whether the mariners marooned to Japan were Siberian tribesmen or highly sophisticated survivors of a hypothetical lost civilization, it is unlikely that they would have been able to pass on more than a handful of useful civilized skills to any primitive local inhabitants. It goes without saying that the skill of pottery would always be ranked near the top of the list in any such emergency technology transfer. Yeah.
Why is that?
You got
Just so
containers.
Containers, yeah.
Containers to carry stuff.
You can make batteries.
Water. Potable water. Yeah. You got to make, First thing you need to make batteries is pots.
That's right.
But I mean, just carrying water,
Yeah, for sure.
Skins. I mean, I guess you could carry water in skins, but
Yeah.
Japan's deer are tiny. They're little bitty guys.
Come on.
Can't carry a whole lot of water in those.
But yeah, that was making me think how did these guys get there and why is their writing similar in its form
Yeah.
to the Chinese? There's
There's definitely influence across with the writing systems and stuff.
right. So what's
But
the
no one
standard
knows what the
what's the
Jomon-
standard model explanation for that? Like they traveled across the sea and
Invasions back and forth, and but yeah, China and Japan are not far away. So in Korea, they're pretty close.
okay.
But
So they were building boats and that's how they
but that's recent. We're talking about the Jomon. No one knows that they had. I doubt that they think they had a writing system. And
Okay.
it definitely. No one's found any, as far as I know, Jomon's script. As far as I know,
Okay.
and if they had, I doubt it would be kanji. That's a newer thing.
Yeah, I don't know the
But the interesting thing. Well, I'm sorry, but the interesting thing about the whole, who knows where the influence went? Which way did it go? Which way
Right.
did it come from? But the Chinese or the kanji system is hieroglyphic. There's 50,000 of them or whatever, and it's a very complex hieroglyphic. It's a, what would you say, like fourth generation? Like hieroglyphs that became less and less like pictures and more like characters until they're almost unrecognizable. But you can still see the ninja with the sword in some of them.
Yeah.
He might be turned sideways and the sword is aimed in a weird direction, but there's still a ninja with a sword in that thing. Okay. Time and space. Whatever the source of the original inspiration, there is no doubt that Jomon pottery is very distinctive. Its most characteristic decoration is the cord mark. Indeed, Jomon means cord mark in Japanese, and is another name given by archaeologists. As with the Yayoi, we do not know what the Jomon called themselves. This decorative technique requires the potter to press lengths of knotted twine down into the clay before firing, and sometimes to roll the cords to produce additional effects. The range of possible combinations is large, and these cord marks in their turn are only a tiny part of the full Jomon repertoire of extravagant and unusual designs. This repertoire, it is worth remembering, exists in 4 dimensions, in time as well as in space. I say this because on the one hand, Jomon pottery is scattered geographically throughout Japan, from the far south, including the Ryukyu archipelago, to the far north, including Hokkaido, and on the other hand is spread out in time, connecting the world of relatively recent and comprehensible history of 2,000 years ago with the world of remote prehistory 16,500 years ago when the Ice Age went into meltdown. Genie in the bottle. Archaeologists in Japan are more accommodating than their Western counterparts, whereas most of the latter would rather be mummified than have me in their museums. The Japanese are much less snobbish and judgmental. In Japan, I have again and again been given the incredible privilege of handling very ancient artifacts, national treasures that in some cases are more than 12,000 years old.
That's awesome.
At the Sato Haramachi Archaeological Center near the city of Miyazaki, this privilege extended to holding in my hands the oldest piece of painted pottery ever found in the world, part of a fine Jomon pot, painted red on the inside, securely dated to 11,500 years ago. To touch it was like boarding an express elevator on the way down to the depths of time. I mean, imagine that. It's a pot, it's full, complete, painted red on the inside, and you're holding it, it's 11,500 years old. You're just like, the guy who made this, heck.
Yeah.
You know, the connection there would just be, I don't know. I find that to be...
I think that's really awesome, too, that they're, and that speaks to their, you know, the modern culture, that how open they are about the discoveries and whatever over there.
Yeah. Yeah, and the Western scientists are like, oh, and the Japanese are just like, they nod their heads, and in their minds they're going, you just, baka gaijin. To touch it was like boarding an express elevator on the way down to the depths of time. I could almost see the ancient artist at work on the same object that now rested in my hands. In a peculiar way, I realized he or she was still alive in this potsherd, like a genie in a bottle. For a moment, the 11,500 years that separated us, more than twice the age of the Great Pyramid of Egypt, seemed a small matter.
That's so cool. That's the way I feel whenever I find a freaking arrowhead.
Yeah. Yeah, even if
Same deal.
even if it's a relatively recent one, you're still like, dude, this is this is old, 2,000 years, you know.
Dude, we went to this, just a brief aside here, we went to our neighbor's property, which we actually developed years ago with my parents' company, and sold to them, and they're really cool
Really
people.
cool.
We went down there, I had found this little Indian mound right before we sold it. And I was like, dang it, Johnson. But anyway, they're super cool. And like after all these years, like we were playing a show, and the owner was there, and we just started talking about it. And he was like, yeah, man, I've been wanting to get down there. And he's like, I did what you told me when we bought it. I crawled around on my hands and knees, and I picked up this little bird point. Tiny little arrowhead. So we ended up going down there on a Sunday. I brought the sifter I made, and we sifted a bunch of stuff and found some stuff. And then like we got tired of sifting because it's a lot of work. And we just all got on our hands and knees and just crawled around on top of this mound, and we were just picking up
these beautiful little bitty bird points.
Tiny. I mean, the thinness of these things is just mind blowing.
Yeah.
I should take some pictures, put them on the show notes. But it was just like that. Like they're all, the pieces of them, they're broken. They're all over, scattered all over the top of this mound. And they're probably, 1,000 years old.
Yeah, they're late archaic or whatever.
Yeah. But still, it's like like they made them and left them here, and you're just like, every time you see one, you're just like, wow. And you can see all the work, all the little tiny flakes of flint everywhere all over this thing, and it's just, it's a crazy feeling of a connection. Yeah, like Graham is saying.
Yeah. And I mean, 1,000 years old is nothing to sneeze at. I mean, that's a long ass freaking time ago.
But there's another thing about it that's, I think, a little different than someone in a museum giving you a piece of pottery. Not to
you mean because you're discovering it yourself?
Because you're there where they left it.
Yeah.
And you are picking it up where they last touched it.
Yeah. Well,
possibly,
maybe.
I mean, come on.
Given floods and...
Well, I'm just saying, it's right there on the mound they were burning in.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you're right in the area where they were living.
The whole mound was moved by the flood.
Come on, guy. The spring is right there next to it.
The whole spring was moved by the flood.
Johnson.
Flood picked up the spring, the mound, and all the arrowheads and moved it. No, you're right. When the spring is there, and they were clearly living next to the spring on this little peninsula, and there's the mountain.
You knew they were all sitting there where we were crawling.
Right.
You know, from time to time, they were there. Maybe the pieces have moved a few inches, few feet.
Yeah.
Whatever, kicked around by some deer.
Yeah.
Broken, this and that. But still, it was right there.
Right.
And then there's just something about that. Like you're looking at the land around you, and it's like they lived here.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sitting where
just
they...
farther upstream from where it washed down from the flood.
in situ with the burn rock and the ash from their fires. So come on, guy.
Yeah, it's awesome. It totally is awesome.
Script
It's a little farther down the stream.
Back to you.
There's also an ancient wall there, which I took a picture of and posted on Twitter. It's fascinating stuff. I wonder, did they build the wall? Like,
nah, they didn't. It's a new one.
It was also picked up and washed down the
It's
stream.
my turn to script everything.
Hey, normally you get to script derp everything I say on this show, and I never get to do it. So that was great. I just got in a bunch of script derping right there. Okay.
I was trying to create an emotional feeling within the listener, and you just destroyed it.
I'm sorry. You're totally right.
That's cool. That's what we're all about here.
Just
you
annihilated
just snaked me, man.
God. I think we achieved it anyway.
All right, cool.
Yeah. Like you said a long time ago, everything is fair game on this show.
That's right.
There's nothing is safe from being laughed at and made fun of.
That's right.
As if we make
to the chagrin of only one commenter that we know of so far.
Yeah, only one guy's been mad at that, and that was really funny to us.
It's true.
Why is everything a laughing matter to you guys? It ruined the show.
Russ wanted to respond,
LOL.
LOL. But we're trying not to be assholes.
Yeah. Just on the show.
It's really hard for me.
Screw that guy. Anyway.
Back to the science.
It requires imagination, said Douglas Kenrick, to comprehend the length and vitality of the Jomon pottery age. Age leaves its mark on vessels buried for so long, but a feeling of awe at the age of a vessel should not blind us to its beauty. In my travels in Japan, I have seen a great deal of beautiful Jomon pottery of all epochs. Made without recourse to the potter's wheel and always in open fires, it takes on a fantastic variety of forms. From the spectacular flame pottery of 5,000 years ago with its grotesque and elaborate rim work, to austere and simple rounded bowls more than 12,000 years old that are decorated only with crosshatch or shell scrape patterns. The cord mark motif keeps cropping up again and again. And other patterns repeat, such as distorted human faces sculpted into the shoulders of vases or vases. Pottery masks have been found that replicate their gargoyle expressions, and one particular style of mask with its nose bent at right angles to the side of the face seems weirdly futuristic. It could almost be a contemporary work in a gallery of surrealist art. Instead, it is 4,500 years old as the Great Pyramid, and part of an ancient Jomon tradition of representing the human form. Dogu. Although I have not personally seen examples more than 8,000 years old, archaeologists I have talked to in Japan assure me that simple pottery representations of the human figure have been found in strata dating back more than 12,000 years. These earliest figures and all the later examples are known in Japan by the generic term dogu. The best known dogu date from around 3,000 years ago and are better described as anthropoid than human, since it is by no means certain that the figures they represent are human beings. They have hands and feet, legs and arms, and a head like human beings, but their features are weirdly distorted, almost as though they are concealed behind some kind of face mask or helmet. The eyes of these figures are most disconcerting, being depicted as large ovals, each with a single horizontal slit. Now, I've found pictures of these, and they are very strange, and I will post some of them in the show notes. Like, picture bug eyes. Like the figures are usually short and squat, and they're bipedal, whatever. But the head is almost an indescribable thing, and then there are these enormous eyes that stick off of it, and to show the eye itself, they just have this slit horizontally going through both of them. It's slightly curved. It's very, very strange looking. They look insectoid almost. Other dogu are different, some seeming to freeze a tortured human face in the act of screaming. Some impose the features of an animal, a cat, for example, onto an otherwise human form, some creating the appearance of mythological beings with the body unnaturally elongated or the face lozenge-shaped. There are multiple examples of exaggerated female figures, notably the 5,000-year-old Venus of the Jomon, found recently at Tanabatake Iseki in Nagano Prefecture, with her gigantic thighs and hips. This mother goddess is similar in proportion and general appearance and possibly in function as well to stone Venus figures found in the megalithic temples and underground labyrinths of the far-off Mediterranean island of Malta. It ain't over till the fat lady sings.
The other weird thing, the dogu, is so much like the dogon.
Yeah, that is interesting. I thought the same thing. It is difficult to guess what the Jomon were trying to achieve through the production of so many different kinds of dogu over an unbroken period of at least 10,000 years. It is very likely, but not certain, that these were religious icons of some kind and were meant to stand in alcoves or niches. But it is also obvious looking at them, and indeed at the whole range of Jomon pottery, that they are the work of a prosperous culture with sufficient surplus to support a full-time professional artisan class dedicated exclusively to the production of beautiful and sometimes awe-inspiring objects. The rice bombshell. The next surprise I had about the Jomon concerned their way of life. Since visiting Sanai Murayama in 1998, I'd been aware that these quote-unquote hunter-gatherers somewhat anomalously sometimes chose to live in large, permanent settlements. I had assumed wrongly that Sanai Murayama, built about 4,500 years ago, was the earliest of these. Then, in April 2000, I visited Uenohara, a much older Jomon site on the island of Kyushu. Kuzunori Aozaki, one of the prefecture's archaeologists, explained that Uenohara had been a continuously inhabited settlement over a 2,000-year period from roughly 9,500 years to 7,500 years ago. They had their lives pretty well worked out, he explained. At any one time, they had more than 100 people living here. They were comfortable, I would even say prosperous. All their basic needs were met. They had ample food, good shelter, comfortable and elegant clothing. And this was a permanent settlement like a village or a small town? Yes. But doesn't that contradict the idea of the Jomon as a simple hunter-gatherer? Yes, it does, because the idea is wrong. The more you get to know the Jomon, the more you know that they were many things as well as simple hunter-gatherers. Aozaki went on to tell me how, in his opinion, the Uenohara community had managed to support itself through a kind of organized agriculture and harvesting of the forest. Not quite farming, but certainly a planned husbandry of nature aimed at sustained long-term survival. This was not to be the last time during a 7-week journey through Japan in April and May 2000 that I would hear hints of agriculture. At Ofuna Sea Iseki on Hokkaido, the chief archaeologist, Chiharu Abe, told me he was convinced that the Jomon had farmed chestnut trees. They imported seedlings from Honshu and then cultivated them here. To all extents and purposes, they were doing agriculture. Another intriguing discovery is that as far back as 8,000 years ago, the Jomon were cultivating a non-indigenous plant, the bottle gourd, which paleobiological studies indicate must have been imported from Africa. There is also some evidence of the cultivation of beans at a very early date. Indeed, according to Professor Tatsuo Kobayashi, the Jomon made effective use of nearly every species of available plants and animals, a conscious and rational use of nature's bounty with a low-level use of less desired species to avoid depletion of the preferred ones.
Wow. Organic farming.
Since it was for a long while more or less automatically assumed that the Yayoi brought rice cultivation to Japan, it is also highly significant that archaeologists have now found undisputed evidence of paddy field rice cultivation by the Jomon at Itazuke on the island of Kyushu. This evidence has been firmly dated to around 3,200 years ago and is thus older than the Yayoi period by several hundreds of years. Matsuo Tsukada of the Quaternary Ecology Laboratory of the University of Washington summed up the findings this way. The oldest evidence of rice pollen in Japan comes from the well-known Itazuke site, Fukuoka, which dates to about 3,200 BP. Since the plant is not a Japanese native, its presence provides definite evidence that rice cultivation began in late or latest Jomon in Kyushu. Phylolith studies support the fact that rice cultivation began at this time. It has been clear for some time that the notion that its cultivation appeared in Japan at the beginning of the Yayoi is outdated, yet this idea persists in the writings of many specialists in East Asian archaeology. So there's much, much more, and maybe we can get into the rest of it some other time, but we are coming up on time here, so let's discuss.
Yeah,
Go.
so I was thinking, all right, here we go. I was thinking about let's say, the time period of the, like after the Louisiana Purchase in the United States, when all of these settlers were moving west, there was, a lot of activity that would be considered, let's say, some climactic event stopped the move westward.
Right. Killed everyone and stopped it. Is that what you mean?
Well, or just made it not feasible to continue. You might, let's say, thousands of years later, you might end up having all of this archaeological evidence further west than any of the settlements.
Oh, yeah.
Of all of these, hunter-gatherer types.
Yeah. Frontiersmen,
exactly. Yeah. But the fact is, we made it all the way to the coast.
Yeah.
And then, and
civilization.
The agricultural, the agriculture continued all the way to the West Coast as well.
Yeah.
So it was completed. But you can imagine that
you're talking about like a wave front of first what you would call hunter-gatherers, followed by a wave of agriculture and settlers.
Yes, like that. But basically, you could look at it like this: if you took a timestamp just of one, just ended all of the motion, ended all of the activity, and went to do archaeological research thousands of years later, you could say, well, there was farming and settlements and all this cities and all this kind of stuff that were fairly primitive.
Yeah.
And then over here, there was hunter-gatherers.
Right.
Well, now they were the same people.
Yeah.
In other words, the people that were doing the hunting and gathering were well aware of the cities and the towns, and they had the same technology.
Right.
But they chose to be out here hunter-gathering.
Yeah.
And discovering.
Yeah.
It's just that you could see this wave front, like you described, move all the way across. Now we have it in the historical record that happened, so it kind of wipes out all of much of the hunter-gatherer evidence that would have been left over, except for the trails and various things that these frontiersmen created.
Yeah. One thing about farming is you plow the land every year.
Yeah.
So any evidence from the year before is turned over and flipped around and messed up.
But my point was that you could have that city or that sort of town or whatever, and then you can also have hunter-gatherer types or just people that...
what your point is that they're part of the same civilization.
Yeah, they live together.
Yeah.
Now, some people live this way, some other people live this way, and they work off of each other. Like the frontiersmen are finding new places for resources,
Right. And they're sending them back to
they're
New
bringing
York.
back pelts and all this kind of stuff. You're not moving around. You trade with them farmed goods.
Yeah.
All that kind of stuff. So yeah, they can exist at the same
So
time.
the people in these settled Jomon cities were basically like the New York or the like New Orleans of the expansion. And you're saying that there were people out doing other stuff and they were trading or whatever. Is that
Right.
what you mean? Yeah.
Yeah,
That's cool. I like that.
I mean, why would you? You know, if
You're
and
out
let's
in the woods
say
moving giant boulders.
and let's say their population, like for whatever reason, their population wasn't growing rapidly.
Right.
Now let's say there were that something happened to increase their population, like what we had in the Americas, all of this influx of
colonists.
colonists, immigrants, or whatever moving here. So you had this constant increase in the population that wasn't due solely to the people that were here.
Yeah.
You know, they might have been quite stagnant at the time
Right.
in terms of population growth. So you can imagine that in this, what was it? What's the name of the people?
Jomon.
The Jomon. They have a fairly stable, not rapidly growing population. But then
Yeah.
something happens and all these
The
people
Ioway,
from
whatever they were.
the foreigners start moving in. Doesn't necessarily mean they had all of the technology of the locals, but that this influx of population would say, "Hey, farming, awesome.
Yeah.
There's a lot more farmland here. Let's boom." And so you see this boom in rice growing,
Yeah.
all this kind of stuff. But there's still these frontiersmen out
Yeah.
there hiking through the mountains and finding stuff and
Right.
doing things and whatever.
Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to.
That's cool.
Just,
Yeah.
like, making
I
that
get what you
correlation.
got. Yeah. I get what you're saying.
So you
there.
need that influx of population to help the technology to grow.
Yeah.
Because without that, you can't have enough farmers that can supply enough food and enough goods.
Right.
And then you can't have.
You can't build up a big enough quote unquote economy to have a good enough division of labor to where you have a dedicated artisan class.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
So it doesn't necessarily mean that when these foreigners moved in, that they brought all of that technology with them. It just means they increased the population so that the technology, the known
Expanded.
technology of the time was able to expand.
Yeah.
And more people can learn how to make pots and
Right.
more people can
And
learn how to farm.
It's fascinating too. Like he points out, like they weren't stagnant. You know, their pottery was shifting and changing back and forth all the time. But you see these recurring patterns. Like I was viewing this as like, what is this? This recurring pattern. Like, and I guess you see that in fashion, right? People are like, yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
You know, you're,
Yeah, I press my pottery in ropes. And then there's your hipsters that are like, oh, everybody's pressing their pottery into ropes. I'm going to press my pottery into leaves.
I'm just gonna drag shells across my pottery.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. There's a mathematical equation to figure out why their potsherds look different over time.
It always
I'm
comes
sorry.
back to hipsters. At least there's math to explain hipsters now.
Yeah.
I'm glad we were probably the first podcast to read that on our show. You can't not make hipster jokes if you're going to talk about them. All right. I think that's it for this week, guys. Here's my paper of stuff.
That's not it.
This is not it.
You can visit the website at brothersoftheserpent.com. Comment there. We will read your comments on the podcast unless you are telling us not to laugh at stuff, in which case we will just laugh at that on the podcast. You can also visit the Snakeskins page on
Yes.
the podcast if you need a new skin. T-shirts, also coffee cups and other various things. A pillow.
Pillows.
In case you want to have enlightening dreams while you're
right.
sleeping.
Almost, probably, certainly, most definitely, 100%, maybe, guaranteed to give you dreams about exploring ancient pyramids. Snake rose pillows.
Yeah. Also, the encyclopedia. If we are talking about things that you are perhaps unfamiliar with, if you're a new listener, you can visit the encyclopedia, and it's just Russ put this thing together. It's awesome. It's pictures, descriptions. There are a lot of the different sites all over the world, the things we talk about. It's
Concepts, younger
concepts.
It's all that stuff.
It's fantastic.
So terms and stuff that you hear us using that you may not recognize, it's a good chance that they might be in this encyclopedia, and they are the Snake Rose non-standard model definition. If you want Wikipedia, go to Wikipedia.
Yeah, the glossary is really where the terms that we use that we've actually made up.
Yeah.
A lot of them we've made up. Many others are
Co-opted.
yeah. But some of the stuff we might say It's just like
Like
what
butt
the hell
flaps?
is that word? Butt flappers or quant suff.
Yeah.
Those things are explained in the glossary. In
the form of memes.
In the form of memes. Yeah. to help with comprehension.
You can also contact us at brothersoftheserpent@gmail.com or follow us on Twitter at snakebros with no vowels, SNKBRS.
Snickers.
We're having a lot of fun on Twitter with everybody, so that's great. And share the shows if you guys can. Share them on Twitter, Facebook, wherever you can share shows. I don't know if you can share shows on Instagram, but you should do it there if you can.
Yeah. Share pictures on Instagram of our show, which you can find on our YouTube page. Thanks to @HistoryShift.
Oh, yes. This guy has been making our shows into YouTube videos. So we are also available on YouTube. Just look up Brothers of the Serpent, and you can find us there. And he has put an enormous amount of our shows on YouTube in a very short amount of time.
And he's put the pictures that we put in the show notes. The show notes, by the way, in most cases are extensive.
Yes.
They're not notes that we came to the show with. They're notes that are produced after the show is done.
Right.
Because this is a free-form conversation with a few plans. And Russ writes up some notes about what the show is about and then posts pictures that are relevant to the show. And @HistoryShift, Brandon Ricks puts those pictures in the YouTube videos in order and at the right spot where we're talking about those things. So it's very useful if you like to listen to podcasts or watch podcasts on YouTube.
Yeah.
We do not stream video.
No.
So don't expect to see us. We are not there. Also, you can donate to the show on the website at
brothersoftheserpent.com.
Brothers of the Serpent. That's right.
Yeah.
There's a donate button there, and it's PayPal.
Yep.
For now, we're just doing PayPal donations. You can write comments on your PayPal donations,
That's
which
right.
we just found out, which we
Send
will
us
read on
free
the show.
money and a comment.
Because you guys that have donated are freaking awesome, and we
Yes.
thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
And basically, every one of your donations is adding up to send us straight to pyramids.
That's
That is
right.
our pyramid scheme.
It's the pyramid scheme. So even small amounts, we've had people send us pie all the time. It's freaking awesome. $3.14. It is badass. So you guys, any amount helps so much, and thank you guys so much for donating. And also, give us reviews. We have been getting great reviews so far. We are still 5 stars on iTunes. It's amazing.
Stop saying that, because somebody's gonna like break the. Some hipster out there is gonna
I'm
be
just
like,
really
I
proud
was
of
the
it.
first one to give him 2 stars.
Then we can laugh at that if it happens.
If you are a hipster, please do not make reviews. Everybody's doing it, so
You shouldn't do it.
You shouldn't do it.
That's right. There you go. Solve the problem. You solved the problem. The hipster trying to be the first guy to give us a bad review.
We do not accept reviews from people wearing low V's. With beards. Until that becomes fashionable. And then we accept it.
Then we totally accept it, yeah. All right, once again, I'm saying thanks to History Shift for doing our shows. You guys can find us or find him on Twitter at History Shift. You can find his YouTube channel, History Shift. Just look him up on YouTube. Thank you so much, Brandon. You're awesome. Also, I want to give a shout out to C-Word Podcast. Those guys have been badass, and they have talked about us. They're giving us shouts out, and we're giving them shouts out. We had their geologists, and maybe we're going to be on their show. Who knows what's going to go on? But they are awesome. If you like conspiracies and you want to hear like 5 people argue about whether conspiracies are true, it's a great show. It's freaking hilarious.
Also, I want to give a shout out to Kmart.
Yes.
For building these beautiful acoustic panels for our studio to help dampen the sound in the 10 by 10 by 10 tangent cube of science, because the waves bounce around in here endlessly.
Yes.
And so Kmart, who has an email address that you can email him at if you're interested in him building you one of these beautiful acoustic panels. At what is his email? Acoustic paneling solutions at gmail.com.
Yes.
Send him an email. If you have a podcast studio or any studio, or just your living room is too echoey and you have to turn your TV up so loud that it's pissing everybody off, you can put these acoustic panels up there like framed artwork. They're beautiful. They look cool as hell.
Yep.
And you can put them in your
All the
living room
hipsters will be jealous.
just to dampen that sound a little bit if you want to watch Game of Dukes and you don't want the Or Game of Thrones. Sorry, we call it Game of Dooskies. You don't want it to be too echoey in your tile floor and concrete wall living room. Send an email to Kmart at acousticpanelingsolutions@gmail.com.
That's right.
Work it out with him. He builds awesome acoustic panels. They're lightweight, so you can ship them anywhere in the United States, preferably, unless you're just crazy and you want to spend a lot of money on
If you live in
shipping.
Siberia and you're moving to Japan, he'll probably ship them to you. Just
If you live in Siberia, just put snow on your wall. Just stack that snow. It's a great dampener.
snow is a great dampener. Yeah. All right, guys.
And thanks to all you listeners.
Yes, we love you. Thank you so much. Good night, Adamu. Get back to work.